welcome to another edition of Will Work for Food. Today we have a fantastic speaker, presenter, a friend of mine, the lovely Miss Sylvia Mayer. Sylvia is a Houston arbitrator, mediator, and attorney. She's got more than 30 years experience dealing with courts nationwide. She's a member of the National Academy of Distinguished Neutrals, and she has served on billions of dollars worth of arbitrations and mediations. She is available online, in person. Fantastic neutral. This is one of my favorite human beings, and I'm so glad to have her here as a speaker today. Sylvia, I know, prefers that if you have the availability of funds to make a donation to your local food bank or to her preferred food bank, that would be greatly appreciated. To date, we know about $434,273.48 worth of donations made to food banks worldwide. Our audiences have been so incredibly generous. Thank you all so very much. Now I'll turn it over to Sylvia, who has the most fantastic take on resolution skills and techniques for us today. Sylvia, thanks so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. There is absolutely no way I can live up to that introduction, so I better just hang up now, but I'll persevere. So forgive me if I can't live up to all the great things that Natalie said about me. And as I'm sure y'all already know, Natalie is herself really a fabulous resource for all of us in the dispute resolution community. So thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you something that I love. So along the way, I started as a dispute resolution provider, recognizing that I find lessons in everyday life. Things I do, just interacting with others, different situations, I will say, hey, I think I could learn from that. That might help me in my next mediation, or that might help me in my next arbitration. And one of the ways that I found was an accessible way to share some of that information was through children's books. So many of us loved children's books when we were a kid. We've read children's books to our children. Perhaps we are now reading children's books to our grandchildren. It's really a place that extends throughout our lifetime as a resource for lessons we can learn. And so I have sort of wandered down this path of reading children's books now through a new lens. How can I learn something from reading this book that will help me in dispute resolution? So for today's talk, I'm going to share 4 books with you and some of the lessons that I learned from them. I welcome you to provide your feedback and your thoughts, your questions, and any book suggestions you may have for other books I should consider via the chat. I'm always looking for new ideas. So I'm going to walk through each of the books, tell you a little bit about the story, and tell you a little bit about the lessons that I learned from reading those stories. So, of course, I picked 4 books that I really love. And so I apologize now, I'm probably going to say over and over again, oh, this is a book I love, because I only picked books that I really love. So the first book that I want to share with you, and I'll hold it up so you can see it. I just love this book. It is called The Night Owl. It is written by Christopher Dennis or Denise. I apologize. I'm probably not saying Christopher's last name correctly. So here's the thing to take away from this. Just ask. That's your takeaway. Just ask. Sometimes we get stuck in our own beliefs about what someone else might accept. We see this a lot in mediation. Somebody will say, well, I'd like to offer X. They'll never take X. Sometimes it's us who think, oh, they're going to offer X. They'll never take X. Whatever those preconceptions are, those beliefs you may have, it doesn't hurt to just ask. And we will learn about that threw the night out. So let me tell you about this story. Owl always wanted one thing: to be a knight. He grew up dreaming of being a knight, imagining himself as a knight, wanting to be a knight. And then he applied to knight school and he was accepted. He was so excited his dream was going to come true. Now, he was an excellent student, but he had a few challenges. It was really hard for him to pick up a sword. It was really hard for him to wield a shield. It was really hard for him to stay awake during the day. But Owl persevered to become a knight. And indeed, he graduated with honors. And he was selected to serve on the night watch, meaning he was the knight watching the castle at night. Get it? Night watch, one of my favorite parts of the book. It was perfect for him. While all the other knights fell asleep, Owl was wide awake. He loved his job until one night he heard a noise, a strange noise, whoosh kind of noise. It was a dragon, a very hungry dragon. The dragon came up to the castle and Owl said, "Stop. I am a knight of the night watch. You must stop." And the dragon said, "I am a hungry dragon, and you look like a tasty snack." Now, Owl was very clever. First, he started to respond with bluster. "I am a knight, you cannot come." That didn't work. Then he responded with logic. "I'm really small and feathery. You don't want to eat me. I wouldn't be a good snack." That didn't work either. So then he tried something different. "How would you like to have pizza instead?" It turns out this dragon loves pizza. So they ate pizza for the rest of the night and became very good friends. And now you see why I say, just ask. You don't know what the other side will accept. Never prejudge. Set that aside. They may just say yes, or the dialogue may continue. But regardless, if you just ask, you can get one more step down the road to resolution. I just loved this book because it really is an example of thinking outside the box. I don't know about other people, but there are so often times in mediation or in life when I think, oh, they couldn't possibly. But who would think a dragon wants pizza? So just ask. So that's the first of my favorite books that I wanted to share with you. Now, the next book I want to talk about, this is another great book, The Recess Queen. We're going to talk about this book because we're going to talk about breaching the bully barrier. Bullies use aggressive tactics, physical and verbal, to intimidate and control other people. And a lot of times, the bully is the barrier to resolution. I don't know about y'all, but I see this often. There is a bully in the process, whether it is counsel, client, some other participant, and they have impeded the process every step of the way. And so now they're in mediation. And the bully is still in the room, and they continue to be a barrier. It's our job as mediators to try to breach that bully barrier. And this book, The Recess Queen, has all sorts of lessons for us to learn on how to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about this book. Mean Jean. Mean Jean, no offense, Jean Lawler. Mean Jean is the recess queen. I'm going to even read some of it to you because it's just so Great. Mean Jean was recess queen, and nobody said any different. Nobody swung until Mean Jean swung. Nobody kicked until Mean Jean kicked. Nobody bounced until Mean Jean bounced. If kids ever crossed her, she'd push 'em and smush 'em. Wallapaloosh 'em, hammer 'em, slammer 'em, kits and kajammer 'em. You get the gist. Mean Jean was a bully. She would yell at people, she would growl at people, she would grab people. She was a problem on the playground. But one day, a new kid came to school. Katie Sue. Now, Katie Sue was a tiny little girl. She was so small that everybody thought she was going to be really quiet and intimidated when they went to the playground. But when the recess bell went ringing, this kid ran ziggity-zag out to the playground, and she swung before Mean Jean could swing. Katie Sue kicked before Mean Jean kicked. Katie Sue bounced before Mean Jean bounced. Katie Sue did everything before Mean Jean had a chance. All the other kids stood back in shock, waiting to see what Mean Jean was going to do. Well, we all know what Mean Jean did, right? Mean Jean charged up to Katie Sue. Mean Jean grabbed Katie Sue by the collar. Mean Jean yelled at Katie Sue. Because Mean Jean's a bully. What did Katie Sue do? Here's where the lessons are. Katie Sue took a step back. Katie Sue did not respond by grabbing Mean Jean or yelling, crying. Instead, she took a breath, she reached into her backpack, and she pulled out a jump rope. And she started jumping rope. And then she invited Mean Jean to jump rope with her. Everyone held their breath. There's a long, awkward pause while Mean Jean tries to decide what's she going to do about this. And then she steps in and jumps rope with Katie Sue. There's a lot to be learned here. From that moment on, Mean Jean and Katie Sue became friends. They giggled, they played, and the playground became a place where everyone could play, where everyone could have fun, where everyone could participate. I love this story because there's so much embedded in it about how to handle a bully. So the first lesson to learn is don't fight fire with fire. One of the ways a bully gets their power is by controlling our emotions. They act in a way that triggers us, and we respond in a way that feeds their fire. Katie Sue didn't do that. She stepped away from the emotions. She didn't let Mean Jean intimidate her, anger her, cause her to be scared, to cry, to run, none of those things. Katie Sue stayed in her experience, in her joy of the playground, and did not give Mean Jean the power over her emotions and her responses. That is a critically important lesson for all of us to learn when we are dealing with a bully in our lives, whether it's in the mediation room or elsewhere. Stop, take a breath, and do not react. Take the power back. You're in charge of your emotions. You are in charge of your reactions. Lesson 2, separate the person from the problem. This is a really important lesson that doesn't just have to do with bullies. One of the things that Katie Sue did was to separate the person from the problem. The person was Mean Jean and her bullying behavior. The problem was that everybody wanted to have fun on the playground. So she separated those and she focused on the problem, not the person. And by focusing on the problem, on everyone wanting to have fun on the playground, she was able to find a solution. So remember that. Focus on the problem. Don't let all the noise in the background distract you. Focus on the problem that is in front of you. Another thing that Katie Sue did was she met an unspoken need. What was that unspoken need? We learn in the story that when Katie Sue invited Mean Jean to jump rope with her, it was the first time anyone had ever asked Mean Jean to play. Wow, that's powerful, right? No wonder Mean Jean was mean. No one had ever asked Mean Jean to play before. So she became mean as a way to control the ability to play. Katie Sue met that unspoken need and invited Mean Jean to play. We all have unspoken needs. And anytime you're dealing with a bully, trying to figure that out can often be the key to breaching the bully barrier. And the last thing that Katie Sue did was she found a solution that met everyone's needs. They all wanted to play and allowed Mean Jean to save face. Mean Jean didn't look foolish by joining Katie Sue in jumping rope. Mean Jean looked like someone who wanted to have fun and somebody to play with. And it opened up the playground for everybody. So I just love this book because the truth is we all deal with bullies all the time. It's part of life. And this is a great example of the lessons that you can use to help diffuse a situation when there's a bully in any context, whether it's mediation or otherwise. All right, now on to another book that I love. I Want to Iguana. Okay, this book is great. So this book really, of all the books I picked, this book is actually about mediation because this book is about the give and take. It's about the negotiation that goes on when people want different things and you're trying to find what the underlying interests are so that you can address the needs and find a path to resolution. Mediation is all about that. It's a process of give and take, a process of listening and sharing, a process of needing to understand wants and needs and the underlying interests. Because just because somebody wants something doesn't mean they need it. But you need to, in order to find a resolution that is mutually satisfactory, you have to address the underlying needs, the underlying interests of the parties. Maybe not everything they wanted, but what they needed in order to find their resolution. All right, so this book is I Want to Iguana by Karen Kaufman Orloff. And in this story, Alex's friend, Mikey, is moving away and he cannot take his iguana with him. And Alex really, 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 really wants to adopt Mikey's iguana. He just has one problem, his mother. She says no. So Alex and his mom start in a process of writing letters back and forth in order for Alex to try and convince his mother that he should be allowed to have this iguana. So I'm going to read some of these letters to you because I can't do them justice otherwise. All right. Dear Mom, Did you know that iguanas are really cute? And quiet, too. I think they are much cuter than hamsters. Love, your adorable son, Alex. To which Mom responds, Dear Alex, tarantulas are quiet too, but I wouldn't want one as a pet. By the way, that iguana of Mikey's is uglier than Godzilla. Just thought I'd mention it to you. Love, Mom. Next letter. Dear Mom, you would never even have to see the iguana. I'll keep his cage in my room on the dresser next to my soccer trophies. Plus, he's so small, I bet you'll never even know he's there. Love and a zillion and one kisses, Alex. So Mom writes back, Dear Alex, iguanas can grow to be over 6 feet long. You won't have enough space in your whole room, much less on your dresser, with or without your trophies. Love, Mom. To which Alex responds, Dear Mom, it takes 15 years for an iguana to get that big. Mikey told me. I'll be married by then and probably living in my own house. Love, your smart and mature kid, Alex. To which Mom responds, Dear Alex, how are you going to get a girl to marry you when you own a 6-foot-long iguana? Love, your concerned mother. And the letters go on and on and on, including one of my favorites. Alex writes, This iguana can be the brother I've always wanted. To which Mom responds, You already have a brother? Eventually, Mom writes a letter that says, Dear Alex, how do I know you're ready for a pet? Remember what happened when you took home the class fish? Love, Mom. Right? So that's a turning point in the negotiation, right? Because she's starting to open the door to the possibility of there being a pet. To which Alex responds, Dear Mom, if I knew the fish was going to jump into the spaghetti sauce, I never would have taken the cover off the jar. Love, your son who has learned his lesson. P.S. Iguanas don't like spaghetti. So then Mom writes back and asks Alex to tell her what he would do if he was allowed to have the iguana on a trial basis. And they go back and forth a few more times until ultimately Mom writes a letter that says, Alex, look on your dresser. Love, Mom. So this book, the back and forth, each of them identifying different arguments, different needs, different interests, different wants, is a really great example of what happens in a mediation. People say one thing, the other person says something different, we start moving, and people start recognizing and understanding where the other side might be coming from, and you move towards whatever the path to resolution is for that dispute. So what did Alex and his mom do in this process? They listened to each other. They shared with each other. They learned from each other. They explored each other's wants and needs, and in that process understood the underlying interests. And that is what allowed them to find a resolution, to reach an agreement. All right, I have one more book, and then I'm going to sort of circle up and bring all of this together. And I know I've already said these are all books I really love, but oh my, I love, love, love this book. And just give me a second, I have to get it. This book is called Silly Sally. Now, first of all, I love this book for nostalgic reasons, because I am old enough to remember when I was in kindergarten My kindergarten teacher read books that were this size, these huge books at the front of the classroom. I'm not sure that happens anymore. And so I have always loved this book just because of its size, although it is challenging to store. I also love this book because it's written in rhyme, which makes it a lot of fun. But really, the gist of this book is help. Sometimes we all need a little help. As people, as parties in a dispute, as dispute resolution providers, in any capacity in your life, sometimes we all just need a little help. And this book is about needing help, giving help freely, and receiving help. And it's a really important lesson for us to learn, because help, asking for help, receiving help, they are all things that a lot of times are hard for us. And it's important that we recognize everyone in any dispute, all the people sitting around the room, they're all people. There's one thing we all have in common. We are all people, and people sometimes need help. In the context of dispute resolution, particularly in the context of mediation, that comes up a lot in terms of needing to be candid with the mediator. So I use this story as a way to say, tell me when you need help. Tell me when your client needs help. Tell me when you as counsel need help. Help me help you, because this book is about needing help and giving help. But let me tell you a little bit about the story. So it's written by Audrey Wood, and it's called Silly Sally. And I cannot do it justice without reading it because it is written in rhyme, but it's so enormous that it's a little bit challenging reading this. But let's see. And I will even attempt to share a few pictures with you. So here is Silly Sally. Silly Sally went to town, walking backwards, upside down. You may have noticed she was upside down. On the way, she met a pig, a silly pig. They danced a jig. Silly Sally went to town dancing backwards, upside down. On the way, she met a dog, a silly dog. They played leapfrog. And the story goes on, and she meets other creatures along the way, including a loon who's in what appears to be a lagoon, and they sing a tune. And eventually, on the way, she met a sheep, and they fell asleep. Now, how does Silly Sally get to town? Sleeping backwards, upside down? Here's where the help comes in. And sorry, this book's so big that it's hard to turn the pages. This is Nettie Buttercup. Along came Nettie Buttercup, walking forwards, right side up. What does he do? Now, first of all, here, they're all there, sleeping, upside down. He tickles the pig, who danced a jig. He tickled the dog, who played leapfrog, and he tickles everyone. And so everybody wakes right up. And they all walk to town. That's how Sally got to town, walking backwards, upside down. One last picture. All of them, all the creatures and the people they picked up along the way go to town. So what did we learn here? We all need help. Sometimes we need help. It's okay. It's okay to need help. It's okay to give help. It's okay to receive help. But in terms of dispute resolution, the really important part about this is that as a mediator, I need you to help me help you. So I always ask people in my pre-mediation calls, are there things I need to know? Do I need to know something about your client? What is your client hoping to accomplish? What do you think the barriers are to resolution? There's lots of questions. I'm sure all of us ask these types of questions. But what I most need from people is that they're honest with me. And they tell me when they need help. Does your client need help processing their emotions? Does your client need an opportunity to just vent and get it all out of their system? Does your client need to hear from a third party that their expectations are unrealistic? Do you need specific information? Do you need help managing your client? Asking for help is a strength, and it is often a critical component in finding a path to resolution. All right, so now we've covered 4 books. What do these 4 books all have in common? Well, obviously, they're all children's books. But you know what else they have in common? They all have lessons for life, lessons that we can extrapolate from to use in mediation and arbitration, but also lessons that we can use in our everyday life. But also makes me realize that in my everyday life, taking this back to where I started, a lot of times I have interactions in my everyday life that teach me lessons that I can use in dispute resolution. I will share a recent experience. I was taking my oldest son to graduate school. We left the house pre-dawn. It was really a very stressful, hectic day for many reasons. And I had an issue with our rental car, and I was so flustered. And the lady who helped me was so calm and so patient and so supportive. I came to her in an emotional state, and she relaxed me. She not only solved my problem on the rental car issue, she helped me take a step back and take a breath. And I really learned from that experience. And in fact, I thanked her for it. I told her, thank you. This was really an important lesson to learn. And I really appreciate you having been so sensitive and supportive, because I know I came to this with emotion. And she was great. It was really a great interaction. But it was a good example of how we can learn from our everyday interactions. Because as a mediator, I have people who come all the time, who are wound tight, who are flustered, who are emotional. And it's my job to help them with that. And so these books are all different examples of how we can take lessons learned in our everyday life and apply them to our skills as a dispute resolution provider. If we go back to where we started, right? We have the night owl. In the night owl, first, our main character, Owl, exceeded all expectations. I mean, really, who thought an owl could carry a sword and wield a knight and wield a shield and be a knight? But he did. And not only did he do that, but he saved everyone from the dragon by thinking completely outside of the box and offering the dragon pizza. Well, that is a very, very good example of how we need to set aside all of our preconceived notions. And we need to be willing to think creatively and try to open up the opportunities to find a path to resolution. I Want to Iguana. This is a great book about exploration. That's a big part of mediation. Exploring what different people are thinking, are feeling, what they want, what they need, what brought them here today. I always ask parties at the start of a mediation, when I'm in a separate room with each side, I say, why are we here today? what brought you to this mediation? And you would be surprised how many times people answer me literally, oh, the traffic this morning was horrible. I spent an hour stuck on the freeway. And it's like, okay, that's what you needed to tell me. I'm okay with that, because that's what they needed to share in order to move forward in the process. Just like in I Want an Iguana, we have all sorts of extraneous information. I mean, really, I'm not sure I agree with an iguana is cuter than a hamster, but that's kind of an extraneous comment. But it doesn't matter, because it was part of Alex's process and part of Mom's process to work through each of those arguments and responses. And as a dispute resolution provider, I need to be supportive of what it is that the parties need to work through to find their path to resolution. And then in the Recess Queen, which is one of my most favorites, we learn such an incredibly important lessons about how to diffuse a bully, how to breach the bully barrier. Because we see this so often in litigation, in mediation, in arbitration. You simply cannot fight fire with fire. It doesn't get you anywhere to fight fire with fire. It's important to take that step back and to examine more deeply how you can move forward in the process. What can you do to help get past that bully barrier? How do you breach it? Are there unspoken needs that you can meet? Are there ways that you can introduce a new idea that will give people the opportunity to pivot and save face? Are there different ways you can approach the situation that allow the parties to move beyond that bully barrier and get to a resolution? Sometimes it is as simple as letting the bully get it all out of their system. Maybe they've never had the chance to vent it all. Maybe they just need to do that. So you have to be creative in finding the ways to get past the bully barrier. And then the last of the 4 books that we talked about, which always makes me smile, is Silly Sally. We all need help sometimes. We all need to be open to receiving help sometimes. We all need to be open to giving help sometimes. And we all need to be candid and honest about the help that we need, because it is that help sometimes that helps us find the path to resolution. And really, that's what all of this is about. Whether you're an arbitrator, a mediator, a litigator, somebody who provides support services, or some other form of dispute resolution provider, we're all trying to help the participants find their path to resolution. And I hope that these stories today have shared with you some ideas on how you can help people do that, or help you open your eyes to seeing new places and new ways where you can find ideas for doing that. All right, so those are all the things that I had prepared to talk about. I don't know if we have any questions or if we want to open it up for discussion. If not, I have a few other things that I can talk about, but I thought I'd pause just to see if people want to interact on any of this.
Feel free to unmute yourself, add in your own story, ask a question, interact with Sylvia if you'd like. If not, we'll let her continue.
And by the way, I am always open to suggestions on new books for me to talk about. So feel free to send me any suggestions that you may have. I see a question. What are the authors' names of these books? I apologize, because I sometimes talk way too fast and I probably skipped that. So I will go through one by one. The Recess Queen is written by Alexis O'Neill, and I will hold this up to the camera in hopes that that makes it easier. So that's the Recess Queen. I Want an Iguana is written by Karen Kaufman Orloff, And I'll hold that up too. That one doesn't show up as well, but hopefully you can see that. That's I Wanna Iguana. The Night Owl is written by Christopher Denise. And here is that one, should that be helpful. And the last one, and this book's pretty old, so I don't know if it's still in print, is Silly Sally, which was written by Audrey Wood, if you can see that. So again, Silly Sally by Audrey Wood, Night Owl by Christopher Denise, I Wanna Iguana by Karen Kaufman Orloff, and The Recess Queen by Alexis O'Neill. All are books that I highly recommend because I enjoy reading them again and again. Any other questions that anybody wants to ask or suggestions? All right, well, so I'm going to give you a preview to one that I'm working on. It's about rage. So there's another children's book that is all about a young boy who has all this anger inside of him and how he processes that anger. And I'm working on a piece talking about how it's really important if somebody comes into a dispute carrying that kind of anger, whether it has anything to do with the dispute or not, it is important to give them that opportunity to process that anger. So I often say as a mediator that I use the ABCs of mediation. A, I'm an analyst. I analyze the facts and the law, but sometimes I'm analyzing the parties. B, I'm a bartender because I listen. I listen to the parties and I listen over and over again. I listen empathically. Just like if you went to a bar to pour out your soul to a bartender, I don't ever say, you can't tell me that story anymore. I let them talk as long as they need to talk. And I'm a chameleon. That's the C. Chameleon means that I adapt my approach, my style to what the parties need at any given time. And I may change during the course of the day. And I say that because that ties into the book I'm working on, or the book review or article I'm working on about the book. Maybe that's the better way to describe it. Because a big part of what I see in mediations is that people come with a whole lot of emotion that's bottled up inside of them. And they need the process to allow them to get that emotion out. And so I'm always struggling with what's the best way? What's the safe way? What's the productive way to help them process all that anger when it's anger, or pain when it's pain, or whatever the emotion may be? And there may be more than one. And so that's one that I have in the works. I have another project that I'm working on that does not involve a children's book, but does involve another book that raises a really important point that I'm hoping to share maybe with y'all on a future program, that talks about the difference between having a learner mindset and a judger mindset. Because the mindset we bring in to our interactions with people really colors and changes how that interaction unfolds. My example of being at the rental car counter is a great example of that. I went in with a flustered, emotional, wound up tight mindset. And instead of the person on the other side judging me and reacting to me, she listened to me. She was a learner. She learned what was going on with me. And she was able to help diffuse the situation and help me. And it turned out to be a really positive and great experience. All right, so those were the things I wanted to share. Is there anything else that anybody has a question about, input on? And by the way, if you have suggestions about books and you weren't able to share them here, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or to email me directly. I'm happy to receive any suggestions people have. I have a whole pile of books over here that you can't see, they're off camera, waiting for me to write about, but I'm always looking for new ones. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you today.
And I